U.S. President Donald Trump continues to be evasive over the murder of Jamal Khashoggi and has said the U.S. will not be changing its business or strategic relationship with Saudi Arabia. But will Congress eventually force the president's hand? And as China practically clears a southwestern province near the Vietnamese border of landmines from a war 3 decades ago, what is China's record on reducing the use of landmines and its stockpile? Welcome to The Point, live from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. President Trump on Tuesday reaffirmed the U.S.'s alliance with Saudi Arabia and defended Crown Prince MBS from charges that he was behind the brutal murder of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi. In a statement laden with exclamation marks, the president called Saudi Arabia a steadfast partner and said the U.S. would not be imposing more sanctions nor changing its business or strategic relationships with the country. He cited Saudi's historic opposition to Iran and Israel's claim that Iran was the world's leading sponsor of terror. Now, in recent days, the president has repeatedly sought to downplay media reports claiming U.S. intelligence had concluded the prince must have been involved in the journalist's death. Last week, the Washington Post reported the CIA had concluded that MBS had ordered the assassination of the 59-year-old journalist. The newspaper said officials had high confidence in their assessment, which was based on multiple sources of intelligence. So what kind of pressure is building in Washington for President Trump, and is the position of MBS now safe, at least for the foreseeable future? Joining me from Istanbul is Serkan Oral, a political analyst. From Philadelphia, the U.S., Brandon Blackburn-Dwyer, president of Grasshopper Group, and here in Beijing, Professor He Wenping, a senior research fellow at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Welcome to all of you. Let me go to Brandon in Philadelphia first. How has the president's statement gone down in political circles in Washington?
In the short term, not well. The president's statement was unusual, to say the least. Multiple exclamation points. First giant paragraph that dealt solely with the threats that Iran represents, and barely an acknowledgement that this was a murder ordered by potentially senior leaders of an ally. Instead, it doubled down on everything that President Trump and his administration believes in, which is business first. He claims that it was America first, which I guess it is, because he doesn't believe that human rights at home or abroad are a particular high priority in the United States, and he'd much rather focus on the business and the oil relationship with Saudi Arabia and sweep everything else under the rug.
Well, late last week, a bipartisan group of senators introduced a legislation that calls for the suspension of weapon sales to Saudi Arabia, sanctions on people who block humanitarian access in Yemen or support the Houthis, and mandatory sanctions on those responsible for Khashoggi's death. And some foreign policy experts are also recommending that the U.S. should reset its relations with Riyadh. But what choices in reality, Brandon, does President Trump really have at this moment?
Very few. U.S. Congress may choose to make an issue out of this. I think that it will eventually get distracted from this and will want to focus on the Russia investigation and a number of other political priorities. Short term, they're going to make a lot of noise. Short term, they're going to talk about more sanctions on individuals. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a hard choice. Does the United States choose to acknowledge a potential CIA report that claims the Crown Prince was directly involved in this? Or are they going to follow the prosecutors in Saudi Arabia and focus on the 15 or 17 or 24 different people that were sort of involved in the overarching conspiracy while leaving out the actual leadership of the nation? If they go after the leadership of the nation, it's unclear what the real goal would be. If they sanction MBS personally, that really all it does is alienate a potential leader of a future. They go after Saudi Arabia, one of the largest consumers, larger than the next 5 on the list of U.S. military hardware. It's unrealistic for the United States to really shut down relations.
At this moment, one of President Trump's argument is that if the United States doesn't sell weapons to Saudi Arabia, Russia and China will step forward and fill the gap. Professor He, what is China's position on the whole thing surrounding Khashoggi's death?
Well, this kind of saying if the U.S. will not sell the weapon to the Saudi, and then the China, Russia will come as a replace. I think this is just an excuse for defending his biased policy towards Saudi, to even want to ignore this kind of facts coming up from this Khashoggi killing. By the way, I think China's stance is very clear. Of course, all those facts should be respected. Now even the CIA has released this report, and also giving those reports and evidence coming from the Turkey. You know, Turkey is the country, and this consular office of the Saudi's consular office is based on Turkey. Of course, Turkey has the very first hand of those evidence. So those evidence has been constantly, released, and even based on the daily basis. So those, I think even CIA has come up with this report. So I think now, China, of course, we are not some parties involved with this issue. So we're just calling for those facts should be digged out, and they should be respected.
Speaking of Turkey, indeed, President Trump has said that he doesn't want to listen to the tape, and he actually did not mention Turkey at all in his statement. So, Mr. Oral in Istanbul, how has President Trump's statement gone down in Ankara?
Ankara doesn't support Trump's policies, and mostly closer to the UK policies. Especially Ankara has a dialogue with King Salman and diplomatically isolating MBS. And Erdogan and MBS had lots of troubles, starting from Qatari issue, Iraq issue, and Iran issue. But Turkey is supporting especially the unity of Iran, and as UK demands. So this is a diplomatic murdering case becomes a conflict between House of Trump and House of Saudis. Turkey will still feed the new clues in the near future, and it seems that Ankara is not blaming especially MBS, but the nucleus will maybe finger point MBS. And also, as you know, the leadership of the Middle East and the Gulf, especially Ankara sees the game, because both Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and United States are around the same circle, and they are targeting some, especially Iran and the other countries. So Turkey is on the other way, it seems.
Okay, it's rather a complicated situation. Looking back, as I mentioned in the leading, though, Brendan, how do you see the kind of pressure building up from the Congress? Do you think what will happen given the kind of congressional pressure on President Trump at this moment?
President Trump has proven himself to be pretty uncaring to congressional pressure in the past, particularly on an issue that President Trump and his core base supporters will see as an issue that is human rights, which they don't seem to care about, which is about a non-American citizen in Khashoggi, no matter the fact that his children are U.S. citizens.
Or just a resident.
He's a long-time resident. They will also see it as a member of the press causing trouble, so he's going to ignore it.
Okay. What about the U.S.'s relationship to Saudi Arabia, Professor He? I mean, at this moment, President Trump has been sending mixed messages, right, about this case. On one day, he would say this is a worst cover-up in history and a total fiasco, and on the other hand, he would say something that's very evasive. How are these mixed signals being viewed from Riyadh?
Ever since this case has been released, and President Trump's those stance towards this issue has been always changeable. Sometimes saying this, sometimes saying that. So all in all, his stance, to work together, ally together with Saudi, I think has never changed. Because in the year 2017, he paid a visit to Saudi and has already shunned this 10 years, this very big. Every year will be 110 billion, $110 billion, this weapon purchase from the United States. So he regarded this as a very big business deal, and also he regarded it as a business deal and a strategic alliance far, far above about this case. This case, in his eyes, it doesn't matter. It's just small things. So I think Saudi also looks at this issue very well. They already regarded themselves as a very key, those core allies, together with Israel in this Trump's administration.
Well, yeah, again, inside Saudi Arabia, however, according to some reports and commentators, that things are maybe starting to agitate a little bit. For instance, some members of the royal family are agitating to think about who really to support as the future monarchy, former future king. At this moment, it's MBS, and he's the favorite son of his father, the current king, Salman. But some are saying although nothing is probably going to happen while this king is alive, after he passes away, probably they will support the uncle of MBS, which is a brother of the current king. So how credible is that scenario, Mr. Oral in Istanbul?
Mr. Ahmed lived in London more than 6 years, as you know, and his opposition to the MBS and ex-interior ministry. So he said what happened in Yemen, don't blame kingdom, just blame MBS. So there are huge differences between the young crown prince and Prince Ahmed. It seems that this will be a short earthquake in the kingdom. The supporters of the Prince Ahmed and also the international pressure on the kingdom will show that there will be a change in the region. It is not about only a crown issue, it's also about the Aramco that will be, just the 5% will be $2 trillion for the stock exchange markets.
Okay.
So think that this will be from London or New York, and these next days will show this.
Okay, finally, Professor He, what about the House of Saud? Some people are believing what has happened to the journalist and the aftermath so far has significantly weakened the House of Saud. What's your take?
Yeah, I think that's for sure. When this prince crown has been named as crown, and the people see he brings some great hope for this Saudi, because he made some reform, like allow the ladies can driving, and also can go to the stadium to watch the football. But on the other side of the coin, he also made this Yemen war, and also has arrested a lot of princes in Saudi, shows a very tough this policy in some other areas. So this is a mixed picture. But given this journalist killing issue, I think it has been brought a lot of those cloudy now on this royal family and their reputation. So this reputation has been greatly damaged. This is need to pay a great effort to reclaim them back.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're going to leave it there. Serkan Oral, a political analyst in Istanbul. In Philadelphia, Brandon Blackburn-Dwyer, president of Grasshopper Group. And in Beijing, Professor Ho Wenping, a senior research fellow with the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. You have been watching The Point with me, Li Xin. We'll take a short break, and when I come back, I'll be asking how China compares with other nations when it comes to the clearance of landmines. Stay with me. A ceremony marked the official end of the third landmine sweeping mission in the Yunnan section of the Sino-Vietnamese border in southwest China. Hand in hand, Chinese soldiers walked across a patch of a former minefield in the border county of Malipur before handing it over to the locals last Friday. Hundreds of thousands of landmines were laid along the border during conflicts between China and Vietnam from 1979 to 1989, plaguing the lives of locals ever since. Now, 2 landmine sweeping missions were carried out in the 1990s, both in Yunnan and in neighboring provinces. A third mission, which started in 2015, cleared 200,000 explosives covering more than 30 townships, practically ending a dangerous legacy that had hindered life there for over 3 decades. What is the significance of China's large-scale demining mission so far? From a global perspective, what countries and international organizations are doing to gradually eliminate landmines worldwide? I'm pleased to be joined from Geneva by Hector Guerra, director of the international campaign to ban landmines Landmines Cluster Munition Coalition. And here in the studio by Professor Su Hao, Professor and Director of the Center for Strategic and Peace Studies at China Foreign Affairs University. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Mr. Guerra, let me come to you first. You are a technical expert, I'm sure, on this subject. How challenging it is to clear mines in terms of technology, in terms of the risk to the lives of the people involved, and the kind of resources necessary to do that?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. It is a great pleasure to be with you today. Demining indeed is a very challenging task. It requires resorting to international mine action standards in order to be as thorough as possible and to, at the same time, protect the lives of the miners. Indeed, there are challenges related to the geography where clearance is taking place, and of course also in terms of what financial and human resources are there available for such tasks. I would like to add that in general, when we talk about demining, the thorough approach to this is part of mine action, which also includes victim assistance and mine risk education, among other.
Okay, I was mentioning that actually so far there have been 3 missions so far in Vietnam, at least, to completely demine the area from 1992 to 1993, from 1997 to 1999, and from 2015 to 2018. Maybe let me go still to Mr. Guerra. How do you look at this kind of phased approach? Why does it take so long and so many rounds to really clear area of landmine hazard?
Well, it happens that landmines can be planted in the context of armed conflicts, and not always is there a good planning for such mining, or there are no records of such minefields that are planted in the context of such armed conflicts. China had completed in 2000 there have been in the 1992 cycles of the mining, 1992 and 1997. Then in 2005, from 2005 to 2009, at that point there was a claim that the mission was completed. But then there appeared new contaminated areas and victims resulting from such contamination. What this also shows is that in spite of completion of clearance, there is always a risk that new contamination could appear. That's why I mentioned before, as one of the elements of mine action, mine risk education, which is a way of working with the population in the affected area so they could be mindful of what has been the extent of contamination, the level of clearance, and what to do should they bump into an affected spot.
Professor Su, from the Chinese perspective, how meaningful, how significant has this mission been to the people who are living in that area, to the local government? And as I mentioned, you know, this plague has been affecting people's quality of life and their economic growth for the past 3 decades.
Yes, we know that almost 40 years ago, there's the military confrontation between China and Vietnam. And as a result of that confrontation, so both sides have to deploy and bury so many kinds of the mines for their own defense, to safeguard their national security. But now, both countries already have the rapprochement and normalized our relation with each other, and now becomes the strategic cooperative partnership with each other. So we have a good relation with each other. But unfortunately, because such kind of miserable situations along the borders area.
Yeah. By the way, the footage we're looking at is the ceremony late last week when the soldiers, before the soldiers handed the land back to the locals. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Professor Su, let me follow up on this question. I think a lot of people will have it on their mind already. There is a international mine ban treaty, or what is known as the Ottawa Convention, signed in Ottawa 1997, and it's a treaty advocating worldwide ban of landmines. So far, 80% of the countries around the world have signed up to it. However, China, Russia, and the United States not among them. Why has China not been a member of it or a signature to that, now that China has seen the level of damage it can cause on people's lives?
Yeah, even though China is the real responsible stakeholder for the national and international security, but we have our own special reality in our national security safeguard, because China is so long, so more than 22,000 kilometers land border. So we have more than many countries around China. Some of them not very uncertain for Chinese national security. For example, we're facing the threat of terrorist separatism, and even some kind of traditional security problem with our neighbors, some small neighbors. So we have to use the special weapons to safeguard our national security.
Or keep that option open at least. Is that what China is trying to do?
Yes, because China's land border is very much complicated. Not only too long, but also is the geographical security situation is quite complicated.
Okay.
Because we have rocky areas, mountains, desert, so not easy to safeguard over this kind of land border. So we have to use the mine to safeguard our some part of national security's area.
Okay, Mr. Guerra, let me ask you this. Although China has not signed up to this treaty, I understand China has actually done a great deal. For instance, the statistics that your organization has provided, that from 2004 till now, China has reduced its stockpile of anti-personnel mines from 110 million to no more than 5 million this year. So how do you look at China's position on this issue, and what China has done actually in reducing the use and the stockpile of landmines?
Well, we of course applaud any effort to get rid of these inhuman weapons, which come in direct violation of the basic humanitarian principles of international humanitarian law. They don't make any distinction between civilians and the military, and at the end of the day, they represent a burden for the population in those affected areas. So at the end of the day, they are more of a burden than a benefit. And as a weapon system, anti-personnel landmines, they are really outdated. So indeed, China has been has followed and in a way endorsed the basic principles and standards of the Ottawa Treaty that we consider relevant, and we hope that at some point, sooner than later, China could become a state party of this international instrument. China indeed has collaborated in different demining activities in the context of UN peacekeeping missions, and has assisted in clearance operations countries in Asia and Africa. However, it is not known to be one of the main donors in terms of international cooperation, financial international cooperation and assistance for mine action. And as I mentioned, the mine problem is not solved only through the mining, but also through victim assistance and mine risk education. But of course, any effort to get rid of these weapons anywhere in the world will be applauded.
Okay. Well, again, China has actually provided some demining assistance to more than 10 countries in Asia and Africa, again, according to the information that I have as released by your organization. And in the last 12 years, China has sent more than 5,300 peacekeepers to Lebanon, discovered and cleared over 700 landmines and unexploded objects. So China is doing something there, and I think that direction is going to continue. Lastly, really briefly, Mr. Guerra, how do you look at the global challenge here? We know that every year still 5,000 people die or get maimed because of landmines. So what is the biggest challenge that we're looking at globally?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's more than that, more than 7,000, at least in the last recorded year, 7,000 casualties, including over 4,000 injured persons. And I just would like to add that the problem with landmines is not just the people who are killed, but how individual lives and families and communities are affected as they result in victims and survivors of these weapons, which are physically and economically affected. The treaty, the Mine Ban Treaty, has been very successful. Most of the countries, most of the states have joined the treaty, and most importantly, this treaty has led to the stigmatization of these weapons. And thus we have that China, India, the US, Singapore, South Korea, and many other countries have suspended the exports of anti-personnel landmines. So that's an important contribution of this treaty. That even though not every state is on board, there are some which, most states have responded to the stigmatization of this weapon.
Okay, thank you very much. We have to leave it there. Mr. Hector Guerra, Director of the International Campaign to Ban Landmines and Landmines Cluster Munition Coalition, and Su Hao, Professor and Director of the Center for Strategic and Peace Studies at China Foreign Affairs University. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.